Hey guys, it's BlockchainBrad, and today we are very honored to have a guest in the house. His name is Nick Martyniuk. He is the co-founder and CEO of WePower. And if you don't know about WePower, we're going to find out today. Welcome. We're really lucky to have you here on the channel. Nick, can you tell us a bit about yourself and your background?
Yeah, hello, Brad. It's a pleasure being here. And well, my background is renewable energy. I was developing renewable energy for the past 10 years around Europe. So it was mainly focused on solar energy and biogas and biomass.
Right. Okay. So you've had a lot of experience in the specific industry.
Yes, and in addition to that, I also did delivery of energy to final consumers.
Right. And just in terms of blockchain, because that's important as well, Nick, have you had much experience in the blockchain industry as well?
I'm interested in blockchain once from 2013. Finding is that there were some payments, some services in Lithuania that Bitcoin became popular. So that's what was my introduction to that field. And actively, I became very interested in the end of 2014.
Right, and I think that's an important thing to mention because there wouldn't be that many people in your position where you have both levels of experience in those two different industries that you can couple together. So Nick, if we talk about the WePower project itself, can we just talk in a nutshell, what is the WePower project?
So in a nutshell, WePower project is a tool to help finance more renewable energy and in this way create contracts on blockchain in which people can trade. So the end game is basically we want to create a transactive grid, meaning we have to have exchange of contracts on blockchain between people, and we do it through financing of more renewable energy, and in such way creating more energy contracts to trade with. So basically create volumes first.
Right, and obviously it's a buzzword right now around many countries in the world. So we're going to be talking about specific countries. But if we could just address the percentage in terms of the current market. I remember listening to you yesterday on an AMA and you were talking about 24%. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, so current level of renewable energy penetration is 24%. Some countries are better, some countries are not that good. Depending on where they are and what are the available resources there. So there we can distinguish between global renewable energy resources such as wind, hydro, and solar, of course. And there are local resources such as biogas, biomass, and geothermal energy.
Right. And
so depending on what resources are, basically, you have different penetration of renewables.
Right, and obviously you're trying to target 100% at some point in the future. And what's interesting also for our listeners is you're not targeting any specific renewable. Is that correct? You're looking at all kinds of possibilities?
Yeah, we're not targeting any specific renewable because to understand it, you have to have different types of renewable energy to work in sync for 100% renewable energy power. Plus some storage capacities, and storage capacity is a different subject. It's a very long subject, so probably we're not going to talk about it today. But we're not looking at one single resource. We're looking at the global first, but then at the local renewable energy sources as well.
Right, and that also suits different climates, you know, because if we're talking about...
Exactly.
So that's exciting. If we could also talk about, in terms of the production itself. I remember listening to you also yesterday about energy production and how that necessarily is part of the plan, but it's not necessarily something that you do. So are you planning on working with energy producers?
Yeah, so in this case, in case of the platform, we provide the tool and platform on which renewable energy producers can come, offer their energy to the potential customers, to sell energy upfront, to get enough funds to bring the power plant online and start delivering energy. And this is where we work with them. We don't do our own renewable energy because that requires quite a lot of funds and a lot of work as opposed to, because I was doing that before, and you have to have a lot of resources to do it well. So, for example, if one company can, in Spain, do 100 megawatts of solar power today, that would be 0.1%
Right.
of total energy supply. So you have to have a lot of developers to have a meaningful impact in one country. And if we talk about globally, if you cannot do it alone, never
Right.
you can do it alone.
And just really to recap what you're saying is that essentially if you did go down the track of trying to be that infrastructure as well, the resources for that per country and per capita even would be enormous, and perhaps even to the detriment of the company itself. So in that respect, what you're saying is that you're focusing on partnering with infrastructure that already exists, and
Yeah.
thus be more profitable, more sort of, and permeate through markets because you can use existing infrastructures now. Is that the plan?
Yes, so we work on the top of currently existing infrastructure. So the grid is in place. We're working on top of that. And this is one of the partnerships that we signed a couple of days ago with Estonian transmission systems operator. That we're working on top of that infrastructure and bringing in renewable energy producers to help them finance more renewable energy projects by crowd financing through people, and sell that energy on the platform as well and deliver that energy to people, whether those be final consumers that just wish to consume energy with a discount, or simple investors that just want to invest in renewable energy and get the money back.
Right, that's really interesting. Nick, can you tell us a bit about the very recent partnership? I noticed it was on a few different platforms yesterday with regard to Estonia specifically.
Yeah, so Estonia is a great partner in our development of the platform. Estonia is one of the unique countries in the world where they have full smart grid in place, full smart metering, and they have a centralized data hub where all the information regarding the movement of energy comes today from the smart metering system. So we partnered with them to work on top of the data hub that currently exists. In the very beginning, when we started developing WePower, we approached them regarding getting the data about a yearly data, let's say packet, to test out how real system works and push all the contracts, all the transactions that happen in a year through WePower platform.
Okay.
And that was very great. It's really helpful in the development of a platform. But what happened 2 days ago, we upgraded that intention, and basically will be given access to live data as well.
Okay. And can you just explain for the listeners, because I remember you hearing that yesterday, why is that important? Why is live data important? And why is the high volume energy trading important as well?
So high volume energy trading important because we currently have scalability issues with the Ethereum network.
Yes, we're going to talk about that.
Yeah, so one of the important things is to understand how what are limitations of the current system, and this is the point where we're happy that we have yearly data to push through the system and see how it works. So we know how many transactions happen a year. But the live data is a very interesting, even better option, because you can see how the system interacts when you don't know what will happen.
Okay. And also, and obviously, you know, one of the great things about what you're doing is that you're planning ahead of time, because as you said, you're aware of some of the scalability issues, but you're also trying to address that. And we're going to get to that with some of the things you're going to be talking about in terms of platform options, which I find, we'll do that now, in fact. So you've mentioned that Ethereum is the platform of choice now. However, yesterday you were talking about NEM and EOS as possibilities for the future. So the thing I guess I wanted to ask you is, firstly, why are you considering those platforms, and have you considered others like Neo for its scalability?
Yeah, so we have some questions in Telegram that happen from time to time. Why do you use Ethereum instead, for example, of Cardano, which is also trading? The thing is that we're dealing with, let's say, critical infrastructure. Energy is one of the most important infrastructural projects in the world that supplies us with the electricity.
Exactly.
So we want to be safe and confident that it will work. So out of the projects that are currently, out of the blockchains that are currently there, Ethereum has a very well working product. It has its own problems and limitations, but still it's a very working product. Cardano, not yet at that point, and most of the blockchains are not yet at that point. So you have test nets where you can try. NEM has a working blockchain as well. It has its own limitations, but if you look at their private chain, then you can have a lot of scalability there. But the choice is you are switching from public chain to private chain. And for now,
and what about
our
EOS?
MVP was done. Yeah, so EOS is a very new beast, and it's looking great so far. A good thing is that it supports Ethereum virtual machine. So basically, if you even do project today on Ethereum, you can switch to EOS as well.
Right.
Which is a very interesting option. And from what we see from the technical documentation that is there, and from the roadmap of EOS, it will be a very scalable solution.
Right, and the reason why I ask that is not because obviously you know that I am a fan of Neo, that's obvious, but that's not why I ask. I ask because if you're a consumer, if you're a user, if you're an investor, you want to know that scalability is paramount above all things for the choice of the blockchain that you use. So
because you'll be staying with that for a while.
Right, so that's interesting that you also say that. But if we talk about Raiden as an example, Raiden is obviously the solution for scalability for Ethereum. Is it likely to be in place, as you've alluded to, by the end of the year?
Well, I'm following quite closely on the development of Raiden network, and so far they're on track. And with the Casper testnet running from before, it was before the new year they launched it.
Yes.
So with Raiden in place as well, that brings a lot of scalability to the Ethereum network already. And the switch to proof of stake is very important as well in the future.
And the thing I wanted to ask you as well, and it doesn't seem to be something that is discussed in many platforms, certainly not in the interviews I've seen, is the connection with Asia doesn't seem to be apparent. And yet again, obviously Ethereum is prominent in the West. Is there possibilities in the future where you will possibly use more than one blockchain? Where you may use one that's predominant in some way, like, for example, Asia, if it has this better scalability, which Neo will have?
So in theory, yes, because what important is for us is to have smart contracts. Right. So if the blockchain itself has smart contracts they're running, of course, yes. The question is if in the future development, if we want to have, let's say, where the countries meet, if you have one part, let's say, China will be Neo, right, and there will be country close by that will be, let's say, the system will be running on EOS or in Ethereum.
Like India, for example, you know.
Yeah, you have to create interconnection between those blockchains.
Right, through interoperability.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so that will be an issue in the future.
I see. That's really interesting. If we could talk about the tech itself, specifically for those people interested in that, how does your tech work in terms of its protocols, and why are they important?
So the tech today, it's a platform that basically tracks. We create on the platform smart contracts for energy. So energy is kilowatt hour smart contract today, and people can trade on that. So you have, as everywhere, you have wallets, you have contracts that are created, contracts that are being sold, and then we have execution. So each contract is a time-based contract, so you have a time of the execution when the energy should be delivered. And the trick is basically matching the output with the delivery.
Right.
So that is what platform does.
Okay. And in terms of the wallet, is it ready now?
The platform, the MVP was done, and we're gonna be releasing a new version of the alpha version in the end of January, probably beginning first days of February, where that is already in place. So on the platform, there is a wallet where you can store everything.
Which is obviously
There's
very important.
not a separate wallet as in the phone.
Right.
But on the platform, yes, you will be able to store the contracts.
Okay, and for anyone who's wondering, they'll want to know this, we will talk about the tokens distribution plan as well. But for now, I remember hearing yesterday you have about 24 people, professionals in your team. So can you tell us just, very simply, what are the key foci, what are the key areas of focus in your team that really bring expertise to the table for WePower?
So my background, I was talking about, it was renewable energy development. The critical part that the core, let's say, expertise in the group to understand how everything works, apart from energy development and just sales of energy. We have a technical part, which is how the energy moves on the grid. And our CTO, Kaspar, he was working before joining WePower. He was working in Estonian distribution systems operator, so he was a CTO there as well. And he and his team were responsible for creating one of the first smart grids in the world in Estonia.
Okay.
So they really are the experts in how grids work, how they operate, how smart metering works, how smart grids work. So that is critical knowledge for any company like WePower to be able to develop this full-scale solution in combination with blockchain.
Right. And I guess we could move that skill set further now, because obviously you talked about Estonia, you sort of started there. I remember hearing words like Spain and Australia. Obviously I'm Australian, so I'm very interested. Can you tell us a bit about, firstly, Europe and what's happening there?
Yeah, so the platform is helping renewable energy projects to develop, and of course we want to help develop projects there where it makes sense.
Okay.
So we are focusing financing of projects that are almost market ready, firstly, and secondly, they're in the best possible conditions that can be there. So Europe, in Europe, Spain is one of the best countries with solar radiation. You could get up to 2,000 working hours out of solar plant per year, which is well, it's the same as in Australia. So it's a very, very good number. And by producing renewable energy there, you're producing it at below the current market price, the cost of production.
Okay.
And so it makes economical sense to help finance those projects because they are very good projects in financial terms, and meaning that when starting there, you can expand quite well in that country as well.
Right. So you're focusing, in terms of Europe, that's your sort of base position after Estonia.
Yeah.
Are you planning on then branching out in the European domain?
Yeah, so it will be Spain, Portugal, Italy, Greece, countries where you have most of the solar radiation. Of course, we're looking at countries where you have a lot of wind and where energy can be produced at the market price. So basically competing with traditional energy production.
Right, that sounds really exciting. And on that note, Nick, obviously at some level, whether it be local or at a federal level, you would be consulting with governments or those that have stakes in, the government or connections. So have you done any of that as you've branched out into Spain, as you've tried to make contact with these centralized institutions?
Well, the good thing about Europe and regulation, although many people hate regulation, the good thing about regulation here is that the rules how you work on the market and engage the energy market are very well defined.
Okay.
Meaning that everything is quite well known how you can, for example, develop a renewable energy project, how you will be connected to the grid, what are the rules for selling energy there. So it limits that interaction that needs to be done because more or less everything is already done on European level, and countries are executing that policy.
Right. So are you saying in that respect that you don't, there's no necessitate, or that it doesn't require you to go and directly work with the government, but you focus more on the private enterprise, or
Yes.
Okay, that's
Yes.
interesting.
Yes.
So
Yes.
can you tell us a bit about that? What's the name of the companies that you're currently working with in Spain?
Yeah. So there are three companies we're working with together. So it's Conquista Solar. It's Civitas project in Seville, and it's Novacorix. So Novacorix has projects in Italy and in other countries as well.
Okay.
They're really good partners that and are experienced developers in the field.
Yep.
So we're happy to work with them, and now we are in talks with other companies as well. Hopefully soon we'll finalize those deals as well.
You can definitely drop the hints anytime on our channel. But Nick, I also wanted to talk to you about that with respect to infrastructure, because that's really important. That's something that is a huge selling point for WePower particularly. If you are going to be working with these companies, as you've mentioned, you've named them, there's no question that they are still utilizing grids and infrastructure at the government level, because they are the platform for usership throughout their country. So
Yeah.
again, indirectly at the very least, you're utilizing a government service.
We're utilizing government service. So in all the countries in the world, the grid is owned by a government through basically they own a company that owns the grid,
right,
and they are allowed to use it with a certain let's say rules that exist there, as I mentioned, for everybody.
Right, and I think that's the thing I want to...
We're working with a private company. Some of them are listed companies as well. So
right.
You wouldn't say that just fully government owned. So part of those companies are listed on exchanges and being traded as well.
And I think that's the big thing too, Nick, is we don't want to send the message that you in any way produce the energy. You are a connective. You provide the service, and that's really important. If we now go...
We provide digital infrastructure here.
Yes, thank you. So digital infrastructure. Sorry, interrupted. So if we go across now to Australia, now this is a really exciting venture that you've established. Let's start off with the very respectable achievement with the award that you received in comparison to many applicants, and then we'll go from there and see where that leads us. So what happened? How did you win this award?
Yeah, so when we started the project, we found out that Startup Bootcamp is doing their first energy track, which would be in Australia. And we were very excited that, to apply. We applied for the program. I think there were about 1,300 applicants to the program.
That's a lot.
The mentors had meetings with 300 different companies, and 20 were selected to come to Melbourne for the final selection days.
Okay, so I'll just recap that. So you had 1,300 internationally, dropped down to 20. Yeah. You arrived to Australia. Then what happens?
And those who don't know what the selection process is, like Startup Bootcamp or other accelerators as well. It's a process for 2 days. You meet a lot of different people. So basically, those are mentors or partners, limited partners in the Startup Bootcamp, that program, like Energy Australia, for example, Spotless, and the Diaz, which are partners in Melbourne.
Okay.
And you talk with all of them. So all the companies that are being selected walk around, talk with all of those people. They move from table to table. And in the end of those 2 days, the mentors have a voting, and they select the final 10 or 11 companies. So this selection was 11 companies.
Wow, and you were included in one of them, as one of them.
Yeah.
That's really exciting. So let's move across. There are some words that you mentioned the listeners may not know. So you talked about, is it Camp Australia? Is that the title?
It's Startup Bootcamp.
Startup Bootcamp, okay. So having researched that a little bit, that's clearly linked to Energy Australia. And as an Australian, what I can say is that's an intrinsically government-related company. It's a very large company. It is arguably the biggest company in Australia for energy provision. So can you tell us about those interlinks between the bootcamp and energy, and why that's important for your company of WePower?
Yeah, so we talked about infrastructure, and actually, for any startup in the space, infrastructure is a very hard thing to get.
Mm-hmm.
So you can have a great idea, but you will not have the necessary infrastructure to test it out. So this was one of the appeal for us to go to Startup Bootcamp and be accepted into the program, meaning that we'll be able to work with Energy Australia and test out and pilot our project, create a proof of concept, if you will, to in Australia on their existing infrastructure to test it out how it works. So the same partnership that we have today in Estonia, and we know how the data is being the energy is being consumed there. It will be very similar project there, but with a different infrastructure in Australia. So we'll be able to work at the same time with two development teams, one in Estonia, one in Australia, on a truly a global project.
Wow, that's really interesting. And for those, Nick, who may argue that you're utilizing a centralized service, because you know that in the blockchain domain, it's all about decentralization. So if the response is that you're utilizing a centralized system and market, what would you say to that with regard to the blockchain?
Well, the production of energy is decentralized, and it's becoming more and more decentralized. The consumption is decentralized, so we can buy energy directly from. We can choose the consumer, and I know in Australia you can switch the company that provides you energy very fast. So that's the centralization. But we are using the infrastructure, which is critical for us to get the delivery of energy. So blockchain is decentralization, of course, but blockchain itself also it's an infrastructure,
yes,
which we use. So you can say the same, that it's centralized in that way. Yes, the infrastructure is centralized. Good thing about blockchain, because nobody owns it. In this case, with energy infrastructure, government usually owns it. But without that, you will have to just create your own infrastructure. Right. Meaning it will be an impossible task.
Right, so if we move across now to the blockchain itself, in terms of what you're providing as the service for renewable energy, why is that beneficial for the user? How is it going to help them? And why is it beneficial also for the enterprise in itself? So there has to be a mutual benefit.
Yeah, so the very idea why we started doing that, the capital for, it's really hard to get by these days when renewable energy became much cheaper and subsidies went away. Banks decided to lend out less money. So it created this void where projects that are being developed require additional capital. They cannot get it from the bank because the bank, although the risk didn't change, the banks still charge the same amount of money in interest. So it's quite low. It's about 1.6 up to 2.5, but they lend out less capital. So, but at the same time, it creates an opportunity for people to be directly involved in that. Because if people are final consumers of energy, why not buy it directly, and why not finance projects directly? And this is where blockchain has a huge impact.
Right. So just to reframe that again, here we have an amazing company called WePower, and I don't say that lightly. I do think that you're a very, very powerful company already in terms of the idea and you're moving into practical applications. But even at the scale of what we typically see in the centralized market, it would be impossible if it was not for blockchain for you to even enter the market, given its sheer magnitude of the centralized systems. So is it fair to say that this is an inroad even for startups like yourself?
I would say that, yeah, blockchain creates an interesting opportunities across many different industries, and energy is being one of the industries that blockchain, especially in the financial part, where it helps a lot.
Right. So if we now talk about the consumer, the user, the imperative person in this, how does it benefit them in terms of reward? Why would they do it?
So basically what WePower allows, because when a renewable energy project starts selling energy, they would like to fix part of the energy sold, and they usually do that through a contract at which they offer energy at a discount, and like a pre-sale.
Like a pre-sale.
They offer energy at a discount and are willing to sell it up front to get additional capital because they were not diluting their own capital, so they are already getting additional capital to bring more renewable energy online. So for them, it makes sense because they will get a higher return on their own equity. But at the same time, they're selling energy at a discount, and it moves that value as well to the customer side. So when we're thinking about the project and how it should be implemented, we're thinking how to create benefits for both sides. So on one side, you're getting a discount for energy of about 20%, more or less, for the consumer to buy energy, which is a lot. So you can get a discount from 15 to 20%.
Right. So sorry to interrupt, but if we talk about specifically how the user can interact in terms of their energy consumption and perhaps even the energy they don't use in the day. So I'm really trying to address that. How can they benefit from energy they don't necessarily use, they have available?
So we're moving in the roadmap of the project. So if we look at the very beginning, we're working mostly on creating volumes. So basically having large-scale production and consumers on the platform to consume the energy or invest in energy. But if you say about the consumer that is just simply buying that energy,
right.
So if he's not using that energy, he'll be able to sell the contract on the WePower marketplace to somebody else. Or if he will not be using that energy, he will wait for the contract execution. The energy will be sold on the wholesale market. So regarding the user, so if he buys energy through WePower, he has contracts for his own energy consumption. If he will not use that energy, he can sell it on the marketplace, or he can just wait for the contract executions to happen and just care about his own life. And the energy will be sold on a wholesale market. He will get the money from there.
Right.
At a later stage, when we'll be accepting a smaller production to the platform as well, anybody can be selling their own surplus energy on the wholesale market, on the WePower platform or on the wholesale market, which will be bundled up, and get a benefit out of it as well.
Wow, so what's really cool about this as well is that they'll be able to do that in their own time, at their discretion, through essentially significant autonomous control. You don't need to rely on the centralized system to do that. That's where the blockchain comes in as a benefit for the user. That's very interesting. If we could go, again, really focus on Australia now, because it is a serious contract for you. And you've already talked about the relationship between Energy Australia. But I want to talk about Power Ledger. And the reason why is because it's already a viable enterprise. It's a blockchain venture in the same sort of industry. Let's talk about the comparisons. Let's talk about exactly what you are in comparison to Power Ledger.
Yeah, so we get this question quite often, and Power Ledger is a great startup that was created last year and has great success on the market as well. So we work in the energy field is big. So there are a couple other companies as well working in the space. But most of us focus on different aspects of energy business. So if Power Ledger, it focuses more on microgrid applications for energy trading. And in their white paper, they say it's to enable transactions for surplus energy between people. We are focusing on other aspect on the grid scale applications of energy trading.
Okay, so they're focused on
connecting large plants to everybody.
Right. So just to be clear, they're focused on microgrid as their, and you're focused on, what would it be in a nutshell, if you're doing the comparison?
So we are focused more on big energy production. So if we, the thing is that in the microgrid, you can transact as much energy as people are producing within the community. You have to still buy the other part of energy. And there are a couple of ways you can do that. Either you still have the connection to power grid and buy it from there, or you have your other type of non-renewable energy generation that will supplement your renewable energy production and trading. So, and if we talk about, well, non-renewable energy production, that becomes quite expensive. The cheaper way would be still buying energy from the grid. And because we're coming already to large-scale applications, that's what we're working with, basically.
Right, so you're really a direct conduit as opposed to this micro approach. You're going straight to the source and working directly with them, as we talked about before. Is that right?
Yeah, so our approach different in that space that both of the companies are for transactive grid and enabling transactions on the grid. Their approach is to go through microgrids first and grow to it through the communities. Our approach is to create volumes first, so more people can join the ecosystem.
Okay, so Nick, what are the specific advantages of not doing what they've done and doing what you do? What is the key? If you could isolate a couple of key advantages, what are they?
I would say it's different ways of looking at the project and different ways of the way you see how the projects can be developed. This basically comes from your own experience, and with the experience we have in our team, we decided to go this way. We see it's a more beneficial way to do energy and expand, as opposed to starting with microgrids. Because in the microgrid, there are two options as well. Either you work with the grid and try to buy out the currently existing infrastructure, or create your own. Let's say we're building a community of 50 houses. We are doing the development ourselves. We're laying down the cables. So anyway, infrastructure belongs to us. So microgrid is an excellent solution. But if you are talking to a residential person who's living in a flat in a city, he cannot do that. If they unite all the people in the house, that might be the case as well. But if nobody else agrees with you, you can just simply buy energy from through WePower from some big power plant, some big renewable power plant, and get it delivered to you.
Okay, so on that note, would you argue that they can coexist? Something like Power Ledger could coexist quite comfortably with WePower in the same area, same country even.
Of course. Look at it this way. Market for renewable energy is an annual investment of 240 billion a year, and market cap of crypto today is around 700.
Okay.
So there's a lot of space in energy space.
Right, and obviously you want to tap into that market as much as possible.
Yes.
So, just in terms of Australia, how much involvement have you already had in terms of meeting and greeting certain officials, or how many times have you come over and been involved in the process?
So I was there for a week before Christmas period started, and our team will be there from 1st of February. Right,
and I also hear that you're looking at some clients as well. A wind farm client. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, so we after the news came out that we were accepted to the program, we were approached by a couple of clients that are willing to work with WePower there as well to connect their developments to through WePower and look at the options of selling energy through WePower to the final consumers.
What I like about this is that you are currently, and we'll get to this, you are currently in the whitelisting phase now. And already you have real-world connections. That's it's not rare, but it's quite an exciting thing. Obviously, me being an influencer in blockchain, sometimes these things don't even happen until well after the ICO happens. You're already doing much of this and establishing the key relationships, key contracts, key potential. So we've talked about the interconnections of Europe, Spain, talked about Australia. Now let's just talk about global position. Are you already looking in other directions right now, like US, like Latin America?
We're always looking at those countries, but in the very beginning, we want to keep focus on what we need to do in the very beginning. So today, it's Estonian project, it's Spain, and it's Australia.
Okay.
Some of the partners we have today, they work internationally, so meaning that they are in Latin America as well. So that opens us, connections already to other countries as well where we can go. US is a very interesting market, and it's although the policy has changed in recently, but still renewable energy is global, and it is very much competitive to other types of energy production. Meaning that even if the policy of the government will change, the market, the incentives for just being cheaper energy will not. So that's an interesting market as well. And there are some, so for example, Texas grid is a full smart grid as well. So right. It's a very interesting state to be in. California is for renewables all the time, and they develop their for renewables as much as possible. So that's also a very interesting state. So of course we're looking globally as well, but we're trying to focus in the very beginning on what needs to be done for the platform.
And what's interesting, obviously, I do talk to quite a few CEOs, and all the best projects that I hear about, that tend to flourish, even in the blockchain, they always start really well in the country that they are of focus, and that's what I'm hearing from you, which is also really exciting, for people who are considering WePower. If we can move across now to your token, obviously it's a dual token structure. Can you tell us a bit about how that works?
Yeah, so the tokens that are on energy platform, those are energy contracts. So those are smart contracts, but for delivery of energy. So it's quite simple. Their price depends on the energy price. So they don't fluctuate much. They're quite stable because you are connected to a very big market for energy trading. The token of the platform is WePower token, so WPR, and it has two benefits basically. So first being that you're getting a priority for any renewable energy that is coming on the platform. So you're able to bid for it, buy it before anybody else does. So it's a 48-hour priority.
Okay.
And then after that, everybody else who's registered on the platform can buy it because it's open for every consumer out there.
Okay.
And the second benefit of it is that WePower token holders get an access to the smart contract to which each energy producer that is coming on the platform is donating part of the energy to.
Right.
So it's 0.9% donated to the smart contract, and it's basically donation straight to the WPR token holders.
I see. So in terms of the sort of a fuel, you talked about the asset itself, and that's obviously the primary token. So that what fuels the economy? What fuels the whole transaction? Is that the second token? Is the design of it?
Yeah, so the transactions are happening. So we have transactions on, if we're talking about the project and its, let's say, expansion, so that will be probably calculated in the price of the WPR token.
Okay.
So which represents the project. But the transaction happen in energy, of course, they happen on the energy token side. So those are 1 kilowatt tokens.
Okay. Now, in terms of price fluctuation, can you talk about that? Because we want to make sure that everyone's understanding of the nature of the industry itself. It's not static. It's not constantly in one price, fixed price. So can you tell us about that?
Yeah. Yeah. So the energy price is not fixed. You have always the production price for the energy and market price. Market price, it's quite simple supply and demand market in which producers try to balance it quite well because everybody cares, especially when in non-renewable energy, you're consuming fuel, and the cost of it is not zero, as in case of renewables. So the price fluctuates depending on different factors. So there are cyclical factors such as weather and change of weather. So, for example, if your country is dominated by hydropower from rivers, and you had a lot of rainfall a year before, so probably the next year will be you'll have a period of cheaper prices on the market because you'll be able to produce more of cheaper energy. And if there was not much rain, so the price would naturally go up. And then you have some changes in weather patterns where you 1 year, or let's say sun intensity, where some years you'll get a bit more sun and or a bit more wind. Thus, at some peak points, producing more energy to the grid as well.
Right, and just in terms of really seamless experience, I wanted to ask about this because much of the things that happen in blockchain happen almost inconspicuously. They happen below the service level. So if you're a user and everything's, let's say it's the end of 2018, and you've rolled out your plans in Spain. From the user's perspective, what are they going to experience? Is it going to be a bill that they see and they pay the bill according to WePower's bill? How's it going to work for them? They don't need to know about the infrastructure for it to work.
Yeah, they don't need to know about the infrastructure to work. So basically, if you're a consumer, typically you'll be consuming around, let's say, if it's a household, around 4,500 kilowatt hours per year, and you would get a bill for the infrastructure, so basically for the delivery of energy, and the rest would be, or it's a balancing. Let's say you'll pay to the platform the amount of energy you overused. So if you used more energy than you bought for yourself, or you'll get money from the wholesale market because you used less energy and some of the energy was sold to the wholesale market, unless you sold part of the energy before and you already got the money back.
Right, and if I wanted to save, for example, say I had a few extra dollars and I wanted to utilize the token and build more of an energy bank, can I do that?
Sure. So energy still is quite stable. So depending on the market where you are in, but it's quite easy to research it. What are the average prices for energy within a certain market, and what are the fluctuations? What is basically the barriers of the trading that is happening on? So if you're willing to, for example, to sell part of the crypto and move it to a less fluctuating market, you just basically can store that value in energy contracts that are tradable and are very liquid, because energy is one of the commodities we use all the time. So exactly. It becomes liquid that way.
That's really interesting. So, we've talked about how users can easily access this, but I wanted to ask you, how are you going to address the issue of marketing, in the sense that how is the information going to get to the consumer about WePower so that they can choose it?
Yeah, so quite a lot of marketing is already out there.
Oh, really?
Sorry.
That's good to know. So what are they?
So we market about what WePower does on all the markets we are present. Of course, we're looking in the very beginning in the people that are mostly tech savvy and understand what the concept is. But we are willing to have those clients as well who are interested in blockchain and are interested in energy as well. But if we just not talk about blockchain at all, people are, you're just presenting an option to buy energy cheaper, and that is very attractive.
So would you argue that in some respects you don't necessarily need to educate about the blockchain, but more about a service?
Exactly.
Very interesting.
So it's more about telling people that you are able to buy renewable energy cheaper than you would normally do, and not more expensive than let's say, it would come from any other retailer. So you have an opportunity to buy energy cheaper, and you can buy as much as renewable energy you need and in large volumes.
And also have access to full control and autonomy through your computer or through your phone.
Of course. And if you don't need it, you can just sell it off.
Right. So Nick, it's been really interesting to talk to you today. To finish off, could you tell us a bit about your vision? Because one of the things you said yesterday in your AMA was that the focus was to be a transactive grid. So can you tell us what is your vision as a beginning startup in the blockchain, and where do you want to take that?
So our end game, I would say, is that we were trying to create a virtual utility, which would help the transition from where we are now with renewables at 24% to 100% renewable energy, meaning that we need much more renewable energy online, and creating enough flexibility within the grid, which is digital basically, to be able to utilize more renewable energy. So because renewable energy, although when you have more of it, when you have solar energy online, when you have wind, when you have hydro, it's already a much better mix than when you have one source. But then still you need to balance it out. So you have to take off the peaks when you don't need them, and supply the energy when it's needed. So that's the flexibility. So you can achieve it through a couple of developments, that being a virtual power plant and supply demand response. And with WePower platform, we are set up very well to utilize that and develop that from day one for the creation of transactive grid.
Sounds really interesting. So, just as a recap of all the different things, you've explained that you're basically a startup that's originated in Estonia, but by no means are you solely focused on Estonia. Clearly, the countries of focus right now are Estonia, Spain, and Australia, and even hints of Italy right now and Portugal. From there, once you establish those and you have a strong footing in those countries, you're going to move out to the globe. You've made it really clear that you're working with infrastructures that are established, which is a really exciting boon for your company. You've got a very strong team. You've got 24 people who right now, that's going to expand, no doubt. I could go on, but right now it's clear. WePower is a force. They're starting right now. The ICO is definitely happening. The whitelist has dropped and people can apply. So on behalf of all the listeners around the world who have been interested in blockchain, particularly interested in renewables, which is an exciting platform, thank you so much, Nick, for educating us about it. We'll be following you very, very carefully.
Thank you. It was a pleasure talking to you today.
You too. Thank you very much.